Welcome to episode 233 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, we're talking about how to prevent burnout by incorporating more play into your lessons, even if you teach at the secondary level. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share blog post version of this podcast episode. And you'll get a sneak peek at our new Truth for Teachers Writers Collective that's launching soon. That's at truthforteachers.com. A big thanks to our sponsor, Generation Genius. If you need inspiring science and math lessons for K-8, try Generation Genius for free. You'll get instant access to hours of fun and engaging videos covering over 200 topics that students will actually love. Every video comes with a ton of resources, including lesson plans, discussion questions, exit tickets, activities, and more. Generation Genius is used in over 20,000 schools, and you can get a free month's trial at generationgenius.com/truth. That's generationgenius.com/truth. Did you miss out on the 40-hour Teacher Workweek full-year program this summer? Check out the 6-week fast-track version, which gives you just the most impactful strategies for streamlining and simplifying your workload as a K-12 teacher. All materials are released up front, so you can work at your own pace, and you never lose access to the course. It's discounted right now to $39, and that includes my favorite tips and resources from the full-year program for organization, email management, lesson planning, grading, and more. So if you didn't want to commit to the entire full year 40-hour program and you like the idea of something shorter and condensed, go to join.40htw.com and click on Fast Track. You'll also see the 40-hour instructional coaching and 40-hour leadership programs for school administrators there. We do accept purchase orders, and we provide support in helping your school secure funding for any of this professional development. So if you believe in making teaching a more sustainable career path, by finding the overlap between what's best for kids and what's best for educators, go to join.40htw.com and you'll learn about all the different 40-hour workweek programs. So my guest today is Laura Gellin. Laura is a full-time English teacher, and she prioritizes student engagement without sacrificing rigor. She currently enjoys teaching 9th grade and AP language and composition at a private school in Indiana. I think you're going to absolutely love Laura's energy and enthusiasm for teaching, and the unique way in which she's found a strategy for preventing burnout, which is incorporating more playfulness into her lessons. This might be the kind of approach to teaching that you hear from a kindergarten or a first grade teacher, but Laura's here to show us that all K-12 educators, including high school teachers like herself, will themselves benefit and see students benefit from learning through play. We'll talk about how to make time for it, how to justify it in your lesson plans, and specific strategies that are really easy for any teacher to do. So, Laura, we're talking about more playfulness in the classroom. And the number one objection that I hear to incorporating more play in school is usually some variation of, we have no time for that. And I think you would say that if we understood the value of play, and we could therefore justify it, it would be easier to prioritize. So I want to talk about how much play enables students to meet learning objectives. It's not a break, it's not a distraction from learning, it's actually an essential part of learning. So can you talk to us about what benefits and outcomes teachers can expect if they incorporate more play in their instructional time?
Yes, absolutely. So I'd actually like to start with one of the big reasons why I decided to incorporate play into my AP language and composition classroom. I feel like AP teachers were so focused on preparing them for the test and meeting all these standards. And it's such a rigorous course that feels like the last place you would have time to incorporate play. And yet I found that is one of the most essential places to have play in my teaching with the different grades that I teach. And part of it has to do with teaching students how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and trying new things. When I think about that AP language course, that's when we want to move students past the 5-paragraph essay and into really creating a line of reasoning and making it a little bit more sophisticated than what they used to do when they were in their younger years. And for a lot of students, they struggled making that step and moving on to that more sophisticated line of reasoning and creating an argument. And I needed to find a way to scaffold risk taking and to make it safe to make mistakes and make it safe to fail, without some big heavy grade attached to it. And so I found that once I started incorporating more play into the activities and the skills that we needed to practice anyway, and finding ways to make it more fun or more competitive or race against the clock, and those kinds of things, that then they were more willing to take those risks and, try to write an essay using problem solution or try to write an essay using some variant of cause and effect. So for that AP class, that was for me a really big moment where I saw I was onto something here in incorporating play, particularly in some of those higher level classes.
So they were definitely into more risk taking at that point. Were there any other benefits that you noticed or that you feel like other teachers could expect if they are able to incorporate more play?
Yes, absolutely. Students are definitely more engaged when you're doing something new, right? We
Hmm.
all want to see our students light up. We want to see our students excited about learning. I remember when I first, when my kids first became around 2 and 3, and I saw them playing, and also saw that their playing is learning, and learning is playing, and I thought,
Hmm.
what happens? What happened to that? Because I think about my high school students and I'm like, they are not having as near as much fun as my 3-year-old who is learning through play. And so that's part of it, is that active engagement. When you incorporate playfulness into your lessons, into your projects, that's really when students can kind of they wake up in this different way than just doing the drill and kill kind of stuff that becomes really easy for us to fall into, I think, as teachers. So definitely an increase in active engagement. And that's when it feels like time flies. Time flies for students, time flies for me. It's a win-win over here when I incorporate play into my classroom. It also gives students a lot more agency and ownership over what it is that they're learning. They have more control, they make more decisions. It actually increases the difficulty of what it is that they're doing. So, one story that comes to mind with that is I was in the middle of teaching the Odyssey, and not some shortened version of the epic. We were doing all 24 books. We were going to read cover to cover, and this was with ninth graders. And we had been, read a chapter for homework, come in, take the reading quiz, and then we discuss or do something in small groups. And then the same thing would happen the next day. So we're nearly halfway through the epic. And I thought, I got to do something different. Like, we are just on this autopilot mode, and the kids are working and they're learning and they're liking the book okay, but they're not in love with the material. And I know that I can't make every kid fall in love with every single book that we're teaching, but I wanted to see more from them. I wanted to see some energy from them. So one day, instead of the reading quiz, I came in with a big box of Legos and Play-Doh, and I plopped it down in the middle of the room. And I said, we're going to have a group quiz today. You are going to use these materials, and you are going to be telling me the story of what you read last night. And it covered everything that would have been in the reading quiz, and some more than that, right? They had to negotiate, they had to tell a story, they had to build, they had to collaborate and cooperate and make all of these decisions. And it was amazing to see, and they absolutely loved it. And it brought life. It brought life to the Odyssey. It brought life to the classroom. And again, it brought joy for them in the learning process, and it brought me joy as well. And I'd say one of the other big reasons, and one of the big benefits of incorporating play into your classroom, is it makes learning this experience, like this memory that they can come back to. And I think about students who return, students who are freshmen in college, juniors in college, even sometimes after they graduate college, they still come back to Park Tutor, and they'll come and visit their teachers, their favorite teachers. And I'll say, do you remember anything from when I had you as a freshman? Do you remember anything from when I had you as a junior in AP Lang? And what they tend to come back to are those playful learning experiences.
That's such an important point because, doing something playful takes more time sometimes than just, let's just take a quick quiz or let's, do this typical type of activity we would do. But when you point to this idea that playfulness activates this part of a brain that stirs up an emotional response. And we know that when you have an emotional response to something, you're more likely to remember it. And it's always been tricky for me to think about, like, how do I incorporate that in the classroom? Because I don't want teaching to feel like, the classroom shouldn't feel like an emotional roller coaster. You don't have to like pull on kids' heartstrings and like
Right.
get them fired up and angry about something. And then, now they're sad about this, or, and you can't keep a level of like happiness, joy, excitement all the time. So this idea of using emotions and feelings that are generated through play to help kids remember things and recall things, I think really helps justify that time expenditure, because what's the point of teaching something if kids aren't going to remember it? And you're exactly right that anything playful, they remember.
Exactly. And I don't play every single day in my classroom. I'm sure my students would love that. But when we think about the value of formative assessment, it's that trial and error, right? It's about giving students feedback in the moment about where they are in terms of their learning target, right? And there are certainly some lessons that can incorporate that playfulness. So there's the playful lessons, and there's playful projects, and the projects do take time, but the playful lessons, those are fitting in back to back with my more traditional teaching as well. And so for me, I also think that part of it is the variation. I mean, students like routine, and certainly it depends on the age group that you're teaching. Definitely certain students need routine more than other students. But I find that with high schoolers, they love asking their friends before they walk in my room. If they see their friend first period or they see their friend at lunch before English class, they want to know what we're doing in class. They're excited because they know it's going to be something a little bit different from what it was yesterday. Or maybe it's one of those surprise playful lessons that we are doing today. So I think keeping it fresh and keeping that novelty up can be exhausting on the teacher end of things, if you take that attitude. But I think if you take the attitude that it's more, to be honest, it's more fun to plan lessons like that. So for me, there's some self-serving things happening here. I'm not going to lie. It's more
Sure.
fun to plan those kinds of lessons. Like, it brings me joy to plan that way, to plan those lessons.
Right. This is definitely more joyful teaching. And you can spend maybe less time preparing something and then just have to expend more energy to keep kids engaged and have to bring higher energy into the classroom. Or you could spend more time front loading, spend that time in the beginning thinking about how can I make this a really like playful experience for kids. I love that you used that word experience earlier. And that's what's going to help them remember it. That's what's going to keep the energy up in the room, the engagement up, the interaction up, so that I don't have to work so hard when I'm in there to try to pull things out of them. So I love where you're going with this. Let's talk about some practical tips for how to incorporate play and playfulness. One of the first things that you mentioned in your article was bringing in materials to explore concepts in a hands-on way. So you gave your example of Legos. What other kinds of materials have you brought?
Sure. So I would say any kind of materials that really work as a blank slate are probably the best ones to go toward. There's certain, toys and materials where you can't really do much with them. It doesn't really leave a lot of room of freedom and choice and decision making and exploration. So again, those blank slate toys or materials are the ones that you would want to bring. So Play-Doh or chalk. If you have any Tinker toys, beads, balls, it's hilarious what kids can come up with as soon as you bring a beach ball into the room. I mean, the fun skyrockets. So whether you do that as a way to, add some playfulness and decision making to a class discussion, I mean, you can take kind of what you do and just layer on just a little bit of fun on top of what you're already doing. This doesn't have to be some radical change in what you're doing. Just add a ball one day to class discussion, and then you throw a ball at a student, and then they get to pick who talks next, right? And maybe you catch the ball and you have to summarize what that person just said in one sentence, and then you offer your insight to the conversation. But the kids find ways to have a great time with some of the most simple materials and toys that you can find.
Another idea that you share is to challenge students to role play. How does that work?
This one, I think, this one I had to tweak a bit when it came to teaching during COVID, because we couldn't get up, right? We couldn't get up and move. We had to stay the 6 feet apart in our desks. But pre-COVID and now getting closer to post-COVID, hopefully, to have students get up and role play and simulate some moment in a book or simulate osmosis, right? If you're a science teacher, anything where they're pretending to be someone else or something else, and you put them in a situation. And certainly, you could do that to read a play, but there's not that much decision making unless you're an actor and you see all the choices that you can make. There doesn't seem to be tons of decision making that happen with students when they just sit there and read Shakespeare play or sit there and read Raisin in the Sun. But as soon as you say, okay, we've read the play, now you're going to take the scene with the witches and you get to decide what time period this is and what is the relationship between the witches and Macbeth and why are they doing this to Macbeth? And when you see some students kind of play the traditional witches in the woods, and then you see other students play it as doctors, and then you see other students play it as mean girls in this, in the high school hallway, and you start to see their creativity and their ownership when they start to do that kind of role play. I really like doing mock trials. That's a fantastic thing to do in an English class or a history class whenever you've got a character or a historical figure making some like ethically or legally ambiguous decision. As soon as you can get students thinking like lawyers, wow, you really see what they can do. Both, I mean, it's fun, but it's so intellectual to have them sort of play lawyer.
I did that one time with my third graders. We put the big bad wolf on trial for blowing down the pigs' houses. And you're right, like the level of critical thinking when they're trying to argue a case is really very astounding. So we picked a fairy tale, so it would be something light. I'm going to make sure I'm avoiding any kind of trauma around,
Right.
the judicial system, the criminal justice system. That we're talking about fictional kinds of situations here. I love that you brought that up.
I love that you did it with third graders.
Yes.
That's courage right there, Angela. No, I love that. And you're absolutely right that there is some, I mean, you have to be sensitive to it. You have to be aware of, you don't want to trivialize, what the trial is about. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to trivialize anybody's experience. And mock trials, I mean, if you choose a mock trial about the wrong thing, it has the possibility to trivialize a really difficult or tragic experience. And so you certainly would want to avoid those. But I think certainly, playing with a play or with a fairy tale, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Another idea that you share is to gamify a specific skill.
Yes. So that is where I tend to take a particular skill or a very narrow skill set or narrow body of knowledge, and then try to think about, is there a way to basically turn it into a game? Is there a way we can practice this skill, but just add like one little element that would technically make it a game? So whether it's something that makes it into a competition or something that has a timer is on and it's about how many examples can you come up with in 45 seconds for this prompt. And every 45 seconds, I'm giving you a new prompt. And then after 5 minutes, we're going to see who has the most examples, right? Something like that. If you can get some kind of element of chance. So even when I think about how I break students up into small groups, I always have a deck of cards with all of my teaching stuff. And so even using a deck of cards, get 4 queens, 4 kings, 4 jacks, 4 10s, and then you shuffle them up, you put them face down, you fan it out like you're a magician, and the kid has to pick the card. And that's how they get into small groups. There's something more fun. There's a little bit of like this spike that happens with students every time they see the cards, because they know they sort of have control over who they're in a group with and they sort of don't. So something like that. Something that maybe has some strategy. So again, those mock trials are perfect for that. Anything where there's an element of guessing or there's some reward. When I think about why students love escape rooms, right? Or why teachers love to design escape rooms and kind of put those on. It's because it's all trial and error, right? It's guessing with no negative consequence, and the students get a reward at the end, right? If they can figure out the 4 clues to open the box, then that's one way to gamify whatever skills you're having them practice.
I never thought about it like that, but you're right. That's the appeal. It's an element of like chance. What could happen? What might not happen? Will we solve it? And the timer example is a good one too, because a timer can turn anything into a game. Like if you say you have 60 seconds, go, all of a sudden, even if it was like an exit ticket, they're
Yeah.
like, wow, let's go, let's do it, do it, do it.
Or when you think about how people have kind of tweaked speed dating, right? And they use
Mm.
speed dating in their classroom to talk about, what's your independent book right now? And you have 60 seconds to talk about your independent book. Or I think I had students one day we were doing, how do you warm up for the AP language exam? Like, what should you do the morning of? And one of the things I say is, you need to get in that argument side of your head, and you need to get there, but you don't want to do anything emotional. So, Twinkies or ho hos, go. And then they're in 2 lines in the hallway and they're arguing about Twinkies or ho hos, and then everybody take a step to the right, and now you've got a new partner, and now you've got a new prompt, and it's Oreos or Skittles, go. And so there's, that all of a sudden is making warming up kind of fun.
hmm Another idea that you shared is prioritizing student choice and agency in the design of a playful learning experience.
So with this one, when I think about one of the benefits of having play in the classroom, it's that students have control. That part of what we do as teachers is we think about, how can I design a learning experience? Not necessarily deliver it every single time, but how do I design and facilitate a learning experience and let the students have that moment of experience? And so if we can give them, here's the goal, here's the deadline, here's what you need to produce, here's the rubric. You get to decide, right? I'll give you the structure, you have to do the content. Or maybe I give you the content and you give me the structure. You have control over the process. How do you want to go about this? I think the more choice and freedom that you can give to students, the more likely it is that they're going to feel those benefits of play, right? Where they will get absorbed, and all of a sudden, you've got your 60-minute block class or your 90-minute block class, and the kids are like, oh my God, like, class is over already? Wow, class flew by today, Miss Gellin. And I love those, because that's when they were in it to win it. Like, they were all in with this project.
And one of the ways that you do that is by lowering the stakes on the grade, right? So you want to increase the likelihood that they are going to be creative, they're going to take risks, and really feel like they can try some of these different options because you've reduced the stakes. There's less of a fear of failure.
Yes, I feel like, I mean, there's kind of 2 ways I think that you can kind of go about this. Sometimes it is about decreasing the weight of the grade. And other times I think it's about choosing how you reward creativity on your rubric. So if
Oh.
the student, they do everything that you asked them to, right? They met the requirements. And instead of meeting requirements being 20 out of 20 for a 100-point project, maybe it's a 17 out of 20 or a 16 out of 20 if you met the requirements, because what you're really looking for is for them to take that ownership, for them to think outside the box. You want to see what they can come up with. And so part of it does have to do with how you design the task or how you design the project, but it's also about showing them like you're not paying lip service to this. This is not just you pretending that you value creativity. You're really valuing it and you're really going to reward it. And what I love is when you have those projects where students are presenting in front of each other and they're actually excited to see their friend's project because they had that freedom. Everyone had freedom, everyone had control. So I'm really excited to see, what that group over there with my best friend, I want to see what they did, because my guess is they did something different from what we did, right? If everybody's presenting the same thing, then those presentations are going to be a snooze fest. So you want something where the kids are actually looking forward to what other people are doing. And part of that is they know they're going to get rewarded if they really go for it and they really take those thoughtful risks.
These are such great ideas and creative ideas. And I wonder what you would say to a teacher who's listening to this and thinking, how does Laura come up with this stuff? Like, I would never think like to bring in Play-Doh. I would never think to do a mock trial. I would never think, to ask my kids, Twinkies or Ho-Hos. How, what would you say to a teacher who feels like they're not naturally creative? And how do you cultivate these kinds of ideas so you're able to think of them?
I think part of it is seeing that the students need it.
Mm.
For me, that's part of it. For me, I think about part of it is watching my own children play. Honestly, it's inspiring to see when you see it work. And so for those teachers who maybe are a little hesitant to try it, I would say just try it. And just like you want your students to take thoughtful risks, you need to take those thoughtful risks too. And it's
Mm.
exciting. It makes teaching more exciting for me. I think it's part of how I've stayed a teacher for almost 20 years at this point, and have avoided the burnout. Is that I want to make it exciting for me too. And so when I see it work, when you see it work the first time, you sort of chase after that. You chase after like that kind of like teaching high, of seeing that joy in your classroom. I think when you can be that teacher, you can be the first one to bring in Legos. You might be the first one in your school to bring in Legos. And so I think especially just again, just try it once and you'll see the payoff. You'll see it the first time. Once you see what it can do for your students and their learning, and you see them light up, you just want to keep going. And so you find ways, whether that means, joining Facebook groups where teachers are really creative and they share their resources and share their ideas, talking with other teachers, listening to Angela Watson's podcast, right? There's so many different ways, but honestly, I think so much of it is being open. And when you're lesson planning, to do it then. That's where it is. It's in the lesson planning. And so instead of saying I need to plan tomorrow's lesson, you might just a tweak of the language could do it all for you to say, how can I design a learning experience? And even just starting there, it's going to bring some more playfulness in.
Yeah, that sounds like so much more fun. Like, how do I design a learning experience? Ooh, I want to do that. I don't want to plan lessons, but
Right?
I'll design a learning experience. That sounds great. Yeah, it's super good advice. I agree with all of that. The more that you are creative, the more you get ideas from that creativity. So you do something and you're like, that totally flopped, but I bet if I did it this way next time, and then you kind of think, well, oh, well, that really worked. Now I can do this thing. And it kind of snowballs from there, I feel like. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I think you've made a really strong case for how rewarding it is and how big of a benefit teachers will see right away. What's something that you wish every teacher understood about incorporating more play and playfulness into their instruction?
I wish that they knew that this was one way to prevent teacher burnout. That this, for me anyway, I think this is huge for me, as to why I still love teaching. I still think of myself as a breath of fresh air, even though I'm no newbie anymore. But I think the breath of fresh air, it's like being young at heart. It like helps
Mm-hmm.
you stay young at heart. And so while I do think that this is a student-centered approach, I don't think they're the only ones who benefit from it. I think teachers themselves, we talk a lot about self-care in the last few years, and we think about think about 40-hour work week. How do I get my grading time down? Teaching can be exhausting if you let it be. But I think that this is a real kind of minor tweak to your lesson planning attitude that has, for me, I've seen real benefits that once I started thinking of lesson planning in this way, um, everything just became more lighthearted. And I felt, how can I bring light and joy and fun into my students' lives and into my classroom? How do I make my classroom a joyful place, and not just in bright decorations and cool things hanging on the wall, but how do I make learning itself that playful joy that I see in my 3-year-old and in my 7-year-old?
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you so much, Laura. This was so invigorating. You sound young at heart. You sound playful. You sound energized. And it is just inspiring to hear someone who, as you said, has been teaching for this long and still has that passion. And I so appreciate you sharing what you do that gets you there. And I think this just really points to, again, what's best for kids is also what's best for teachers. There is an overlap in there, and we have to find that. We don't have to choose one or the other and give everything for students at the expense of ourselves, or, only think about ourselves and just, put the quality of kids' education on the back burner. What you've identified today, I feel like, is the perfect overlap between what kids need and what teachers need.